Today on Hearts of Heroes, a man and his wife are left clinging to a buoy in open water when their boat sinks off the Georgia coast.
As soon as we got on scene, the boat was about halfway sunken.
As we were getting close, we're like, there's two survivors hanging on to the buoy.
Plus, a dangerous street race leads to a potential disaster.
It was only a matter of seconds until that entire compartment was going to be engulfed in flames.
When all seems lost, heroes are on the way.
It is the ultimate escapist fantasy. Buy a luxury boat, sail off into the horizon. But for one couple and their dog, that dream was a reality that turned into a seaborne nightmare.
Luckily, the United States Coast Guard is always ready. And when the Mayday call went out, these brave rescuers flew in.
The oceans and many waterways throughout the United States are kept safe thanks to the dedicated members of the U.S. Coast Guard. While their duties include maritime security and law enforcement, they serve another critical function.
We primarily do search and rescue missions. If someone is out on a boat in the ocean or a small river around and they need assistance, we are their primary means of coming out and rescuing them and help save them.
The bustling port city of Savannah, Georgia, keeps their local Coast Guard very busy.
There's so much traffic down here for all kind of boating, whether it's sailboats, recreational boats, fishing boats, whatever. The more traffic, the more we're needed around.
So Air Station Savannah, we have 5 helicopter units. 1 aircraft is stationed here, fully ready to go in Savannah at all times, 24/7.
Miles Coleman has a home in Port Charlotte, Florida, and has plenty of experience navigating the water.
9.5 years in the Navy, so a lot of water safety-related courses.
After he retired, Miles and his wife April decided to buy their own boat.
It was kind of the dream for many years to be on a liveaboard boat.
In May of 2023, Miles and his wife, along with their dog Reggie, set sail from Florida, heading up the East Coast. But on day 9, just off the coast of Savannah, Miles could tell something was wrong.
The boat was acting differently. It was sluggish. It was just not the same boat. And shortly thereafter, the alarms came on for high water in the boat.
As Miles steered the boat on the upper deck, April went below deck, where she found massive flooding. As both put on their life jackets, April lowered the dinghy, and Miles radioed the Coast Guard while activating the boat's emergency beacons.
The sinking boat had an emergency locator beacon called an EPIR, a valuable device found in many types of watercraft.
I told her, take the dog, get in the dinghy.
But when April put their dog, Reggie, in the dinghy, he panicked, flipping their only means of escape. Now, Reggie and April were in the water, floating away from the boat.
The current and the tides were taking her away from me and the boat.
Miles made the split decision to jump in and save his wife. But with the boat sinking and the dinghy upside down, the couple had nowhere to turn.
I looked at the boat and I said, goodbye.
They were now in the open water.
So I looked around and I thought, well, that beach is probably the closest. And as we tried to swim towards it, the current in the channel, we weren't making much progress. So I saw a large buoy about the same distance in the other direction. So we went to that. It was much easier to swim to that. When we got to the buoy, we turned, and there was the boat, and there was the dog on the top of the boat, standing there looking at us like, well, what are you guys doing?
Realizing that any attempt to rescue Reggie would put him at risk, Miles decided to wait for the Coast Guard, who by now had received the distress call.
There's a requesting a launch for someone in dire need of assistance. We hopped in the aircraft and headed out.
The helicopter that they use is the MH-65 Dolphin, primarily designed for search and rescue missions. On board were 2 pilots, a flight mechanic, and a rescue swimmer.
As soon as we got on scene that day, we saw a boat off in the distance. The boat was about halfway sunken. It was clear that it was sinking.
As we were getting close, we're like, there's 2 survivors right there. 2 survivors hanging on to the buoy.
We opted to use a harness deployment, which is me putting Brian down with the hoist cable, and then he's gonna swim over to the survivors, assess the situation.
These kinds of rescues can be dangerous. They require precise teamwork between the rescue swimmer, the flight mechanic, and the pilots.
Once they positioned the helicopter over the buoy, rescue swimmer Brian Johnson was lowered down.
First, I have to assess if either one of them's injured. I kind of get a small injury report, but almost immediately they're telling me to go rescue the dog that's still on the boat. I pretty much explained to them, I already have contact with you, so we're gonna get you first and get the dog afterwards. I was able to easily talk them into getting the young lady up first.
Because April was suffering from a rib injury, they decided to hoist her up in a basket.
We were able to get her into the basket and send her up.
She was pretty cold. She was shivering. She was definitely scared.
I stayed down with the other survivor, and him and I had a very long conversation about how he wanted the dog to be taken first. He even asked me to swim over to the boat and leave him there.
I was trying to convince him that he's not that far away. I don't know if he's gonna jump off, then we have additional issues.
If you leave a survivor to go do something else, who knows what could happen in the meantime? So you just don't take that chance.
His training and his professionalism said, clearly, we're not getting the dog. But once we get you, once I am rescued, he would make an effort to go get the dog.
Once they send down the hook for the second time, I hook that up to me. I get the survivor hooked in the rescue sling that we have, get that wrapped around him. So now we're hooked together and we ride up together.
But there was no telling how much longer their dog Reggie would survive on a sinking boat. Coming up, time is running out for Reggie, the stranded dog.
We were a little worried about the boat if it was still sinking.
But first, a tip to keep you safe in the ocean.
There's nothing more relaxing than a day at the beach. But did you know the ocean can turn from tranquil to turbulent in just seconds?
If you encounter a distressed person in the ocean, don't go in after them unless you're an experienced lifeguard. There may be hazards like riptides that put you in danger. First, signal for help by waving your towel, then quickly call 911. Finally, do your best to keep them in sight until help arrives.
The rule is simple. If you see someone struggling in the ocean, stay calm, call for help, and unless you're capable, don't go after them. The Coast Guard had rescued Miles and April Coleman as they clung to a buoy in the water off of Savannah, Georgia.
Now, their rescue mission turned to the family dog, trapped on a sinking boat.
We repositioned over to the boat, and yep, there the dog is, just standing there.
We were a little worried about the boat if it was still sinking. We didn't know. You never really want to hoist to a platform that could be potential move or sink or cause danger. So we actually elected to put Brian in the water next to the boat.
Once I got down to the boat, I tried to make contact with the dog. He just walked away from me. He was not having any part of me. And he basically walked on the boat until he couldn't walk anymore. He was kind of trapped by the guardrail. And at that point, I guess he realized there was nowhere else he could go. He just kind of sat there and he let me grab a hold of him.
He gave the signal and they lowered the basket down and put the dog in the basket. And he came up with the dog in the basket, holding on to the dog.
I'm holding on to him to make sure that he doesn't do any sudden movements once we start going up. I've seen before where animals will freak out, and they've done some wild things, so I wanted to make sure he didn't jump out of the basket halfway up the hoist.
Once everyone was on board, there was a huge sigh of relief.
It was like another big adrenaline release. Everyone was excited. Finally, the dog was safe too. Everybody's safe.
Very thankful. They're very thankful. The guy was shaking our hands.
It was a bad situation for that boat, but now everyone is good to go, and it's time for us to head back to the airfield here.
Couldn't express more gratitude, more understanding of how difficult their job is. The way they handled it, the precision, the flying skills, swimming skills, people skills, they all just couldn't have been better from the minute they showed up.
Of course, incredible rescues like this one don't happen by accident. They take countless hours of training. Sheldon Yellen of our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration, recently got a chance to participate in one of these elite helicopter training missions.
How often do you train?
We like to train as much as aircraft allow us to train without being broken.
How intensive is this training? What is the regimen you guys are going through?
We go and practice like it's real. So we go hoisting with different pilots, different aircrew, different rescue swimmers to make sure that we're all on the same exact page when the mission comes.
So what I'm getting from this is that you are the ones that are doing the training. You're the professionals. You guys are the experts. And anybody on the receiving end of a rescue has to listen to the instruction and to the benefit of your knowledge to get to safety.
Yes, sir. It's very vital for the victim to stay calm and just listen to our instructions because we are the professionals to help you get back home.
Because of their training and commitment to helping others, the members of the Coast Guard are protecting people's lives every day.
The opportunity to go save someone's life is huge. Spike, we have our mission. This is what we train for. This is what we're going to do as a team.
Having that feeling of helping someone is really what it is. And I guess in a way that's a pat on the back. So it is gratifying to get that.
It's just amazing to watch them firsthand. The Coast Guard does a spectacular job.
Coming up, a head-on collision and a race against time.
There's a person inside of the vehicle that can't get out.
The vehicle was actually on fire.
In recent years, street racing has become a dangerous national crisis. In 2021 alone, there were 315 fatal and entirely avoidable car crashes caused by this treacherous activity.
In 2022, one young man put his life and the lives of others at risk when he participated in a street race, and it would require first responders to put their own safety on the line.
Palmer Township is a small community located on the state line of eastern Pennsylvania. Here, you'll find historical buildings not far from rows of cornfields and vast stretches of country roads. Palmer's Main Street was once a little rural byway running through miles of country landscape, but that has all changed.
Over the years, a lot of different companies have bought the farmland up there and put warehouses up there.
It's become a very busy thoroughfare with truck and vehicle traffic.
In recent years, sections of this two-lane road have been expanded to accommodate the additional traffic.
There's an area where it goes into 4 lanes and then into 2.
It goes down from 4 lanes to 2 lanes rather drastically.
While this has attracted commercial business, it's also attracted something else.
It became a hangout for the younger kids. These younger crowds have souped-up cars that they like to show off.
This, in turn, has led to a very dangerous and potentially deadly activity: street racing.
Unfortunately, we see it a lot in our line of work. People should realize that you're putting not only yourself at risk, but you're risking the lives of everybody else in the roadway.
Street racing can result in serious injury to yourself or others, or death.
Excessive speed is often a major contributor to deadly traffic collisions. It's never a good idea to participate in street races.
In May of 2022, Palmer's Main Street was the scene of one of those horrific collisions.
It was a scene of horror on Main Street. 2 cars had collided.
2 cars were in fact racing side by side, passing each other at high rates of speed.
The road suddenly turned from 4 lanes down to 2. Now, one of the cars was heading straight into oncoming traffic.
There was a vehicle that was traveling the opposite direction.
The racer tried to pull out of the lane but lost control of his car.
When he came back onto the roadway, he crossed a double yellow and into the opposite lane, thus striking the female that was driving the opposite way.
It was a violent head-on collision. Miraculously, the female driver only suffered minor injuries, but the young man who struck her was not as lucky.
He was unconscious and not alert.
Soon, calls went out to 911.
The call came through dispatch stating that there's possible entrapment, which just means there's a person inside of the vehicle that can't get out.
We were given a follow-up update that the vehicle was actually on fire.
Officer Evan Goldstein was the first to arrive.
I immediately ran over. There was flames coming out from the firewall of the vehicle, pouring into the passenger compartment.
Coming up.
It was only a matter of seconds until that entire compartment was going to be engulfed in flames.
But first, a tip to keep those behind the wheel aware and safe.
It's estimated that 8 out of 10 drivers regularly demonstrate aggressive behaviors. Road rage could lead to danger or even death.
If you encounter an angry driver, don't respond to aggression with aggression. Stay calm and maintain a safe distance from the hostile vehicle.
And if you feel threatened, call 911. These dedicated emergency operators are always standing by to help.
In May of 2022, a street race caused a head-on collision between one of the speeding vehicles and an unsuspecting female driver. The young man who was racing was now unconscious and trapped in his burning car. Officer Evan Goldstein tried to suppress the flames with a fire extinguisher.
Initially, I thought I was making good progress. I was able to extinguish the flames in the passenger compartment, and then there were flames coming out from the engine compartment. The fires can escalate pretty quick because you have multiple fluids that make that engine work, and those flammable liquids will ignite off.
Officer Kyle Cromer joined him, getting his fire extinguisher, but it was an uphill battle.
Fire extinguisher is not for combustible liquids, but at that time, we had to work with what we had.
As you would extinguish one area, it would pop up in another area, so it was just relentless. A bystander and I were trying to pry open the passenger door. There was no way we could get that door open due to the crush, the impact of the car.
The other door seemed just as hopeless.
The driver's side door was wedged up towards an embankment. So you could only get the door open, but so far.
How are we going to get this person out of here?
But now, the heat and smoke were impacting the officers physically.
It was extremely hot. 1 minute you could see, and then the next minute you couldn't see at all.
The mixture of the dry chemical and the burning plastics, it became too difficult to breathe.
It was only a matter of seconds until that entire compartment was going to be engulfed in flames.
Time was of the essence. A vehicle fire can cause the car to explode at any moment.
My determination was to break that rear window, get this guy away from the immediate danger.
Meanwhile, officers and firefighters tried frantically to get that driver's side door open.
It just seemed like they had superhuman strength at that point.
One of the Palmer Township firemen was able to actually get almost his whole body inside of the driver's side door.
At one point, I felt someone grab a hold of my duty belt to hold on to me so I wouldn't fall forward.
Everybody kind of worked as a chain and just pulled him out. Once we got him out, then we were able to lift him up and put him on the stretcher.
The young man was rushed to the hospital with traumatic head injuries. Officer Cromer also needed medical help after performing that rescue.
I started dry heaving and coughing up everything from breathing in all that smoke.
Officer Cromer made a full recovery, and weeks later, he and the entire squad of first responders were rewarded for their valiant efforts.
We got a proclamation from the township for our efforts that day in front of the board of supervisors. It was a nice surprise.
It felt good. Even though it comes with a job, it is nice to know that what you're doing is appreciated.
While the driver of that vehicle was lucky to have survived, his permanent injuries provide a stark reminder of the dangers of street racing.
The message here today is to obey the speed limits. With reckless choices that you make, not only can affect you, but can also affect others.
Whether in the water or on dry land, disasters often happen in a flash.
Let's give thanks to both first responders and Good Samaritans who have the guts and fortitude to help those in need.
And thank you for supporting these brave men and women. We'll see you next time on Hearts of Heroes.